All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us virtually tonight. My name is Irene Chan, and I am the programming chair for the New York Book Forum. For those who may not be familiar with the New York Book Forum, we are a nonprofit in New York that aims to build connection in the publishing industry and promote literacy. So we have been doing more in-person events in 2024, and tonight's program is our first virtual program this year. I'm your meeting host, so I've muted everyone, and only our panelists and our moderator are unmuted right now. I'm going to open up a Q&A section, and I'm going to ask everyone to drop your questions while the panel is in session in the Q&A section. And those will be hidden until the end so as to not distract our panelists and the moderator. And I will ask those questions in the end when we'll have time for that that portion. So tonight we're going to be talking about sustainability in publishing. There are many ways to approach sustainability, and any organization with sustainability goals recognizes the need for conversation and collaboration across our industry. Tonight we have an amazing trifecta of panelists to speak about this topic. So please join me in welcoming Katherine Fernstrom, Director of Strategic Partnerships at Sappi Paper and Chairperson for Sappi North America's Sustainability Customer Council. Charles Light, Production Director and Environmental Lead at HarperCollinsUK, and Susan Lee, Vice President of Environmental Health and Safety at Lakeside Book. Tonight's conversation is moderated by Scholastic's talented sustainability planner, Claudia Pilcher. So thank you to our panelists and to our moderator, Claudia. Claudia, I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you so much, Irene, for that great introduction. I'm really looking forward to the conversations we'll be having this evening. So, as the moderator of our sustainability panel, I'll start by providing a bit more background about myself. My name is Claudia Pilcher, and I am currently in my second year of my role as sustainability planner at Scholastic. So in this capacity, I oversee a number of our sustainability initiatives, help ensure our regulatory compliance, and support Scholastic's efforts to embed sustainability practices across our business operations. I'm very honored to be joined today by Katherine, Susan, and Charles, who are all experts in the sustainability space and have an extensive amount of knowledge about the publishing, printing, and paper industries. I know Irene gave a brief introduction, but I'd like to allow each participant to speak a little bit about themselves and their roles at their respective companies as well. So, Katherine, since you're in the bottom left of my screen, would you mind starting us off?
Sure, no problem. This is a little like Hollywood Squares. I think everybody's in a different place. So I'm Katherine Fernstrom. Thank you for having us this evening. This is lovely. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Sappi North America. Sappi is a wood fiber company. We make everything from printing papers to pulp to packaging and specialty grades. So as a global organization, we have a pretty well-rounded and robust sustainability platform given the nature of what we do. I've been with Sappi 27 years and I'm also chairperson for our Customer Council on Sustainability, which is a way through which we bring the voice of the customer into the conversation at Sappi around sustainability as part of our governance structure. So thank you again for having us.
Thank you. Charles, if you wouldn't mind going next.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thank you for inviting me this evening. I'm Charles Light. I'm a production director in HarperCollinsUK. I've 30 years I've been working in publishing, and more recently, the last 5 years, the lead for environment in the UK.
And Susan?
I'm Susan Lee. I am the Vice President of Environmental Health and Safety for Lakeside Book. We are a producer of trade, educational, B2B, catalog books, and digital, both in digital and print. We've got about 22 sites, and we started our sustainability journey about 2 years ago. So we're fairly new into the system itself. They brought me on board to help get them started with the sustainability program, and I look forward to the conversation we're going to be having.
Great. Thank you so much to all of you for that. I'd like now to move into the discussion portion of our panel. So I'll start with some of the specifics about the role of sustainability and environmental stewardship within each of our panelists' respective institutions. I'll open this to anyone who wants to jump in first, but if you wouldn't mind speaking about how long, Susan, I know you mentioned, have you had a program dedicated to this specific matter? And where does the sustainability team sit within your company's organizational chart? Additionally, how do you think that that organizational positioning impacts your business's ability to integrate sustainability practices throughout the business, whether that's in a positive or negative way? So whoever would like to jump in first.
I'll take that one. So sustainability falls underneath the environmental health and safety branch of Lakeside Book. We have we hired a sustainability supervisor this year. So she started in January this year, and she's really started the wheels rolling further than I had even got him going. We have a senior EHS or a sustainability council that meets on a quarterly basis, and our ESG senior committee constitutes of HR. We have legal involved in it. We've got EHS, we've got purchasing, we've got shipping. So it's really an all-encompassing. And the committee itself, so the sustainability supervisor has brought on board green teams in each one of our locations. So we have 22 green teams. Those green teams will bring forth ideas on the sustainability to our sustainability specialist. She brings it up to the ESG committee, and we'll take an overview of it, help drive the process. And then I will present to our senior leadership team the sustainability practices and our goals. And so we've got a lot of support from our leadership team, which really helps drive a lot of our initiatives moving forward.
Great, thank you. Susan, just quickly, you mentioned during that answer, ESG group. Would you mind just defining for anyone who isn't aware of what ESG means?
Sure, absolutely. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So it is environmental, social, and governance. And the environmental piece literally is all about the environment. The social piece of it can be anything from employee health and safety to social abilities into the communities. And then there's the governance piece of it, which has to do with business ethics, that type of thing, and the governance of the programs and the business itself, the finance end of it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, anyone who has spent any time in this space knows that there is a number of acronyms and words and lingo that we use that anyone outside generally would be unfamiliar with. So please forgive me if I ask you to clarify any definitions at any point. But
not a problem.
Charles, you want to go?
I can go. Thanks, Katherine.
Okay.
So, I think at HarperCollins, our sustainability journey probably started about 12 years ago. We committed to using 100% FSC certified wood fiber in all of our products that we produced, which was a big thing for us, big commitment, and we managed to do that, and we managed to keep to that. We also, on top of that, we fiber test all the paper board in all the fiber products that we use in our books, which means some of them fail sometimes, inevitably, but it really does keep us on our toes and makes sure that all of our books are being produced from using paper from sustainable sources, and it keeps paper manufacturers on their toes and paper mill groups. More formally, I think with sustainability, we've really taken it kind of to the next level, we feel, in the last 5 years. Much like Susan was talking in Lakeside, we've got kind of different levels within the organisation. So at the lower level, we've got a green team, which any member of our organisation can join, and they can come up with ideas and use their energy and commitment, even though they're not experts in the area. And it could be everything from ideas, small ideas, to that are sustainable, where it's reducing the use of plastic in the building, or litter picking outside, or something like that, doing charitable work, through to the production sustainability team, which that's the one that does the real hard work, because 75% of our emissions come from the actual that we create come from the actual manufacturing and the transportation of our books. So the guys in that team are the ones that are really kind of changing the perception and spreading the word and making people in the whole organisation think about sustainability, because in HarperCollins we think sustainability is part of everyone's role. Everyone's got a part to play. And the more senior level, we've got an ESG group, which Susan was explaining, which reports into our executive team, which takes formal things forward for implementation in the wider organisation. We've also got our owners, have got senior vice president of the environment, and we've got a global head of compliance as well, based in New York. And we work closely with them in all our sustainability work. Katherine.
Okay, I want to make sure I want to make sure you were good. So Sappi has had a integrated sustainability business platform for probably the better part of 20 years. It's sort of part and parcel of our operation and our culture. As a wood fiber company, it sort of has to be, right? Our goal is to optimize and maximize the use of every single tree. And so in that comes a fairly strong and robust planet pillar in particular. And so for us, sustainability is really embedded at the highest levels of the organization. It's lives within the C-suite. So sustainability is typically a C-suite position embedded with innovation and R&D, and reports to our regional CEOs and our global CEO, and then has staff and support and resources that sort of trickle down from there. It's been a journey over the last 15 or 20 years as we've sort of matured into the space. Susan was talking about her Lakeside's relatively new process and how they're examining it. And for us, the big learning over the last 10 to 15 years has been around talking the walk. We do a lot of the right things, but how do you make that relevant for the customers and for markets so that they can understand what you're talking about? And so as we've sort of learned to talk that walk, it's led us to embrace things like the UN SDGs and SBTI, and making those commitments that we think will further the organization for years and decades to come. And that's an alphabet soup thing, right? She's going to stop me. Yeah, okay. So UN SDGs is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which is a platform that was set up by the United Nations of 17 pillars or levers that organizations, municipalities, or governments can sort of pull on or impact to create better outcomes. So those are things like water stewardship, gender equality, no poverty. So there's a whole list of these 17, and depending upon where your organization sits in the world and the services or products they supply, you kind of pick the things that work, and that helps inform the strategy you create. From there, some folks, and I think HarperCollins is in the SBTIs as well. SBTIs is science-based target initiatives, and this is a collaborative between, again, the United Nations Global Compact, the World Resource Institute, World Wildlife Federation. So this is all like WWF, CDP, WRI. There's a lot of letters, and I'm forgetting somebody. CDP, WRI, yeah. So those folks have all collaborated to create this group where entities, organizations commit to a platform to measure their progress against climate emissions and carbon mitigation to get below those Paris Climate Accord goals of 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius by 2030 from a platform that's designed against whatever year you started benchmarking against. And it's a very rigorous, formal process, as I'm sure Charles can attest. So it's, that's sort of where we are.
Yeah. Thank you all. And thank you, Katherine, for defining that. You read my mind. So I'd like to transition into a bit of a broader topic area now. We can kind of delve into some of the significant challenges that are being faced by the printing and publishing industries as they relate to sustainability. So we're fortunate enough that we have participants joining us here from both the US and Europe. So maybe if we could start with Charles, I would be curious what some of the critical priorities and issues you're seeing from your perspective, and what should we be allocating our time and resources towards at this moment in time? And then maybe we can open it up to Katherine and Susan to give their American perspective, if you will.
Okay, thank you. So HarperCollins globally has a huge supply chain. We have over 100 suppliers globally. And what's important is to really understand that supply chain. What are the levers? What are the risks? And to understand where the sustainability risks are. And I'll talk about sustainability in a number of ways. So it's social compliance. So are the staff in all the companies being treated properly? The health and safety, are they getting paid properly? Because we're talking about a number of countries here, in Asia, South America, Europe, North America, etc. So we do a lot of things, and we look at the risk for all of our suppliers on the location, where they are, the size of the business, and the industry. And we conduct social audits, on-site social audits. Well, we get companies to do that, not ourselves, to do social audits either annually or every 2 years based on the risk of on those three: location, size, and industry, and follow up on any non-compliances. And those non-compliances can be anything from finding that there aren't fire extinguishers, to making sure there's eye wash, to making sure that they see the wage slips randomly, and they go in and they ask to see the wage slips or ledgers on holiday and breaks and things like that. It could be up to 3 days, the social audit. We also make sure that our supplier contracts are up to speed with all legislation, and we have a supplier code of conduct to the way we expect our suppliers to work for us, and that includes the way they treat their suppliers, because we're not just responsible for our direct suppliers, but we're also legally responsible for the suppliers down the line, that we do a certain amount of due diligence, and again, that things that, you know, the staff are treated properly, that we're taking the right amount of concern over the environment. We also are part of the Science-Based Targets Initiative that Katherine mentioned. That's a huge commitment for our company, but it does make sure that we measure, we baseline, we monitor, and we set targets, which is really, really important, because you can't improve unless you know where you are. So, and checking that and reporting that to our board every year on our performance, and investigating continually the areas that we can improve, whether that's on transport or on the materials we're using, or the suppliers we're using. We also partner with a company called EcoVadis, who they assess all of our vendors in our supply chain annually in 4 areas. So that's on environment, labour and human rights, ethics, and sustainable procurement. So the sustainable procurement is further down the supply chain, to make sure that they're putting in the due diligence when they order transport, or order paper, or order ink or chemicals. So, and we do that, and we get a score in those 4 areas, and also areas for development that we can actually speak to the supplier about with our annual supplier meetings and environmental catch-ups with them. So yeah, a lot of things going on, and this is to do with it's to do with continuous improvement and regulation that we now have to do, especially in the European Union, which we may discuss later. But yeah, which is becoming more and more important within supply chains. That answer the question?
It did. Thank you.
Katherine, go ahead. I'll go after you.
Okay. So again, you know, as a wood fiber based company, as we think about the planet pillar, or that E pillar, you know, what we're really focused on are 3 primary areas of concern around combating climate change, water stewardship. So how much are we taking, and then how do we put it back in a high quality manner back into nature? And then waste management. So the byproducts of making the things we make, you know, how can we limit those waste streams? And then when there are waste streams, how can they be diverted to beneficial use? And then, of course, on that sort of social pillar that Charles was talking about, we're really focused on the safety of our folks. Our primary goal is to make sure all of our employees in a very large manufacturing environment get to go home safely to their families every night or every morning, depending on what shift they're on. And that is a huge focus for us. And then as an extension of that, we have similar supplier code of ethics and approaches to how we engage with our suppliers. We do use EcoVadis like HarperCollins does for that purpose. And we have it as an extension of our SBTI's commitment, a supplier goal, related goal around their emissions getting into 2030. And so as we think about how that might translate to where publishers and printers might be focusing their time in the future, we like to think about it in a couple of ways. One is impact to climate. That's a big focus for everyone, I think. Probably goes without saying. Impact on nature. So are you aligned with suppliers who are harvesting in ways that encourage biodiversity and are leaving forests intact for generations to come? And are you aligned with folks that are putting water back into the world in a good way? So that sort of impact. And then as a third pillar, if you will, it is around that social component. Are you aligned with suppliers who are lowering the extension of your risk by sending home their employees safely and creating a great working environment, and are linked with suppliers downstream from them that are doing the right thing? I mean, I think it's really that simple. So that's sort of the way we view it at Sappi.
And then I'll take it from the printer side of the business. There are challenges, obviously, that you run into. We have some pretty significant focuses. The first one for us is the environmental piece of it. We hired an environmental manager in January of last year, and Laura has traveled around to all of the different locations and did environmental audits to make sure that we're in compliance with all of the permitting, the air permitting that we need to make sure we're not discharging any VOCs, that type of thing. We're taking care of the area around the buildings, and that we are maintaining things within the communities and volunteering within the communities. And so those were all pieces of the environmental side of it that we certainly focus on. Water usage, low flow faucets, low flow toilets, that type of thing, our energy reduction, going into LED lighting, different things like that are happening throughout all of the platform with Lakeside Book. And then we focus on the safety, health and safety piece of it. Obviously, that's a large focus for myself, just because I came in as a safety professional and a safety engineer. So, working to make sure our goal, our tagline is zero as possible. Incidents can happen, but they are predictable and they're preventable, and we want to work towards zero at all times. And we have locations that are zero, and again, you get into the printing industry and you've got the big presses, and you're feeding the web paper through the presses, and there's all sorts of rotating shafts and whatnot. So, it can be a high risk environment, and we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to provide that safe work environment for our employees. Then we've got the social aspect of it. We have product safety falls underneath us. The forestry certifications fall underneath us. So it's really in the big picture of things, it's a very all-encompassing purchasing. We have just purchased a sustainability platform that will have data that we can upload into, which will be so much easier, Charles, to fill out the things like EcoVadis from, because we'll have all of that data tracking instead of all the Google Sheets that we're using at this point. It'll all be centralized and focused. Now, we won't have centralized questions, but we will certainly be able to have those focused in the areas that we need to, so that we can drive some changes and really move the ship forward even further.
That's great. Thank you, Susan.
Mm-hmm.
I think kind of going off of that question, one of the things that you all discussed that I think is very interesting as it relates to this topic is the idea of sustainability as the E in ESG, this more broad environmental, social governance way of looking at things. Within each of your companies, based on your experience with this and your own personal knowledge, do you think it's best for other companies who are just starting out in their journey to look at the E as part of this broader ESG, or to kind of separate out and allocate separate resources to each of these sort of concepts respectively?
That's an interesting question, and the reason why I stepped in right away is because I just had a conversation with our environmental manager, and she works hand in hand with the sustainability specialist. Those two are so intertwined in different things that they're working with. You know, we have April 22nd is Earth Day. Well, we decided to make it Earth Month instead. And so we've had a big push on every week, different targeted things, plant a tree, build a birdhouse, start a garden, all these different ideas that all of the different locations are working at. And so they definitely go hand in hand.
Yeah, I agree. The conversations we have, we've got a compliance lead, social compliance lead within HarperCollins UK, and I work very, very closely with her. The meetings are with the same people generally in the organisation, or the same group of people. And I think if people, the people that are kind of engaged and happy and are generally the people that are working in the environmental space as well. I think they're highly intertwined as subjects, and shouldn't be separated really. I think they're the same area.
Yeah, I would agree as well. And one of the things, both Susan and I work for organizations with really heavy manufacturing environments. I mean, presses and paper machines are big, loud things, and these are also places where, you've got to work on your emissions footprint. And I don't think it's a sort of a coincidence that at Sappi, our two mills are among the lowest in North America in our competitive set from an emissions perspective. And they're also among the safest. Our Somerset mill celebrated 5 million man hours without a lost time injury this winter. I mean, that's exceptional. So to Charles's point, I don't think those things are accidents. I think safe environments tend to result in places where folks really want to work and invest in creating environmentally friendly environments. And I think they work hand in hand, and I would never recommend separating them if you're new to the journey.
Absolutely. Never pillar them out.
No, I think that's a good way of putting it. Never pillar them out.
I like that. And congratulations to you, Katherine, on that success. It's very impressive.
I can literally take no credit for that, just so we're clear. Like, I'd love to be able to say it was all me, but no, we have people for that. We have awesome leadership taking care of those places.
That's amazing. Thank you. Just want to be conscious of time, so just moving into kind of the next question we have. All three of you, as we mentioned, have had a number of years in this space and have seen such great change during your time in your positions. I'm curious if you could speak to a little bit about the kinds of changes that you've seen in regards to the way that we view sustainability as a critical component of the business. Like, for example, do you think that awareness of this issue has increased in recent years? And if so, could you possibly give your opinion on why you think that is?
I'll take.
Sorry, Susan.
I'll just run some statistics by Charles, and then I'll pass it off to you. We did a little bit of a study on this because we did some demographics, and one of the demographics that we learned was that the younger generations really take the environment as a high value. And if they have a choice of working with a company that is focused on the environment and sustainability process, they tend to go towards those companies and will stay longer at those companies and have more tenure at those businesses than they do a company that doesn't show much interest in the environment itself. That's a very high priority for them. And an example of, we talked a little bit about businesses and the awareness as businesses have of ESG and sustainability. In 2017, we had 8 requests to fill out sustainability questionnaires, ESG questionnaires. In 2021, we had 13 requests. In 2023, we had 29 requests. And I have filled out in 2024 7 requests so far this year, and I'm only into May of this year. Of April of this year. So you can see it's just growing exponentially. And those reports that we're filling out, the questionnaires we're filling out, started out to be 5 to 10 questions. They're now upwards of 300 questions. And there's not a lot of standardization to it. So it businesses are definitely getting more involved in it. The awareness has definitely been raised. And Charles, you can step even more into that.
Yeah, I'm feeling guilty now because I'm probably one of the people that's asking. I do apologize.
No worries.
Yeah, I think there's three big changes I can see. So one of them is businesses have to find these bits of information, and unfortunately it kind of filters down the supply chain, because customers like ourselves are being asked by our customers about our products, where they're being manufactured, the amount of energy that's gone into manufacturing things, and all the social compliance angle about the manufacturing plant. There's so many questions we're being asked by different retailers, and that we also get authors and people readers writing in and asking questions that get passed to me, sometimes actually physically writing, not even emails still, and they want specific questions, even down to the inks, believe it or not. We get sometimes from readers, and they'll tell me they've bought a book, they'll show a photo of the book, and can you tell me what ink was used? And it's at that kind of granular level. So yeah, then we get the kind of laws and regulations and standards coming in, which we talked about acronyms earlier. Well, that takes acronyms to a new level, and also the kind of the publisher collaboration. What I've seen in the last 4 or 5 years has been fantastic in the UK. Publishers have stopped being competitive on sustainability. Yes, there's the odd the odd piece of news that we put out that we try to get ahead of our competitors, but on the whole we're sharing information, sharing best practice, sharing knowledge, and there's a number of forums in the UK now and in Europe where we're actually trying to put standard practices together, whether it's reporting, whether it's questionnaires, whether it's policies together, and so we're not all asking separate questions to people like Susan and to Katherine, and trying hard to kind of formalize and making international standards in those areas. So I think they're the three things. So it's really kind of laws, regulations, customer, author, retail awareness and requests, and the collaboration within the industry.
And I think from Sappi's perspective, 10 or 15 years ago, the only thing our customers wanted to talk about was certification. How much certified fiber, what certifications, what's the difference between the certifications? Is there a difference between the certifications? And that's evolved, exponentially since the creation and the signing of the Paris Climate Accords back in 15, 16. And so with that, there's been this expanded sort of amplified focus on just this broader issue around climate mitigation, or carbon mitigation, climate, and so we've gotten beyond certification on the E-pillar, and we've had this additional sort of push around the social compliance, using Charles's phrase. And so both of those things are very different than where we started, which was really just, do you have SFI or FSC? Those were literally the questions 15 years ago, and now it's, what are your emissions? Can you tell us scope 3? Can you tell us what your water quality is like? It's just a very different conversation. And I think, to Susan's point around the generational difference, it is different because there are, there's new blood coming into our industry that is really invested in how sustainable not just the companies they work for are, but the people that they do business with are.
Yeah.
And that is going to carry folks over the next several years, and probably continue to accelerate these trends around the want for information, the want for transparency, and that want to see improved performance over time.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It's honestly quite encouraging to hear from all three of you the kinds of things that you've been witnessing. Charles answered my next question a bit in his response, but I'd like to kind of backtrack a little bit and talk about some of those questionnaires maybe that Susan had brought up. Clearly, the number that has increased from 2019 is quite large. And again, as I mentioned, as encouraging as that is, it's obvious that there is sort of a lack of standardization within the publishing and printing industry for these kinds of questionnaires and sustainability language that we're seeing in contracts and quarterly business reviews nowadays. Do you think this is sort of a effective long-term solution for reporting purposes moving forward, or how should we start to consider alternatives to this as we kind of move into this being a long-term goal and business initiative that we have?
I think it's important that we start to move towards standardization just in the basic questionnaires. You know, we get questions about usage. How for natural gas? Here's a perfect example of it. Some are asking about therms, some are asking about decatherms, some ask about cubic feet. When it's paper usage, it's tonnage, it's paper, how much is in the individual book weight. So we're never truly comparing apples to apples. And that makes it difficult because then you can score. I'm just going to use Ecofetus as an example. You can score an A on Ecofetus, and I could be going on Nevada, and I could be scoring a D. And I'm giving them the same answers, but they're interpreting them differently. So if we don't find some type of standardization across the network and the platforms, we're going to always struggle with that side of it. We want to be able to move the needle in the right direction, but we want to make sure that we're focusing our energies on where they need to be focused.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, the one thing is there's lots of new regulation coming in across the globe. So I'm not so familiar with North America, but in Europe and in the UK, it's every 3 months there seems to be something coming up. I mean, there's bigger ones like EUDR, which is the European Union deforestation regulations. Now, this is very onerous and it's difficult for a lot of people because people don't really understand, and it's not kind of really developed and people's understanding of what we need to do yet. But what it should do is it should form some standardization of the questions that need to come back to down the supply chain, whether it's to manufacturers like Susan or to paper groups like Katherine. So there should be then some sort of standardization of the questions, and everyone then can just take that information, or Susan can pass the same information across to all the requesting people. That is one of the good things about regulation. There are other good things, but that is one good thing.
Well, and I think, one of the things that we've struggled with is this notion, and we've talked a lot about this in the Sappi Customer Council, that group we've got assembled, people from different industries to come and help us understand where we need to be headed. And this notion of reporting fatigue is real. So it's the sheer volume of the requests, the complexity of the requests, and to Susan's earlier point, the different metrics that are being used, but could be applied to the same product, same material, same raw input. And so that's where we really get hung up, is how do we create some clarity around that? And I was actually talking to somebody about this last week. I was talking to actually my director of sustainability about this, and she was pointing out to me that the automotive industry back in 2000 started a standardized reporting portal. I think it's called IDMS, where all of those suppliers that create parts, the millions of parts that go into our cars, have to enter the information around how they got there, the materials, the energy, all of it. And, whether it's Volvo or Ford or BMW, they can go in and sort of parcel out the information they want, but it's in a standard form. And so this notion that, Charles is talking about in terms of getting closer to international standards would be, I think, a welcome change. Frankly, we take regional standards right now. That would be great. We know it's iterative, so we're not like trying to rush anything, but I do think there's going to have to be some steps made so that we're comparing apples to apples, as Susan mentioned.
Absolutely, yeah, and thank you, Katherine, for sharing that example. That wasn't one that I was familiar with, but it's nice to know that what you're saying is it can be done. It can be standardized, as we have seen. So it is something that perhaps we as the publishing and paper and printing industries should strive for. I do want to be conscious of time. Irene, I know we wanted to leave a bit for questions. Would you like to move into that, or do we have time for maybe one more question from the panelists?
We do have time for more questions from the panel, from you. We don't have to move into Q&A right away. Thank you.
Great. So I'll kind of wrap it up. I know one of the things that we had talked about, Charles, that you mentioned was this the EU deforestation regulations, which I think are really top of mind for a lot of people, which will, for those who are unfamiliar, will require companies to produce certification for imported raw materials for all of their products. We're also seeing in the US new SEC legislation about climate-related financial disclosures, and Canada new extended producer legislation. So I'd like to kind of ask all three of you how you're starting to think about these sort of regulations, and what kind of tangible actions are you taking to ensure you comply, and then maybe in turn, what are some things, some takeaways that you could suggest to companies and peers who are a bit newer to this sustainability journey as they start to think about all of these regulations, which can be quite overwhelming?
I can start on that if you like. So EUDR is the first agenda point on any sustainability meeting that I kind of I join now in the UK and with my European colleagues. So I think the worrying thing is there's so little known at the moment. There's so little firm information. My understanding with EUDR is that there's going to be some big database where we're going to be a bit like the motoring manufacturing, where whoever imports the fibre, the paper, the material, or the printed material into the European Union has to put the information about that product into this database. But it's unclear. No one I know has actually used this database or trialed it or knows how to do it yet. There's talk of a kind of blockchain type barcode, QR code that would follow paper, or would follow a book, or would follow some wood pulp or fibre. But any more than that, I really don't know. But the regulations are a concern, certainly within our business and certainly with colleagues, especially with smaller publishers, actually, because they don't have the resources possibly to be able to kind of cope with these things. So yeah, I do feel for the smaller businesses.
Yeah, we are, as it relates to just launching off the EUDR topic, Sappi has manufacturing locations in the US, Canada, South Africa, Finland, Germany, Austria, Italy. We're a little all over the place. And product from those sites moves in and out of the EU all the time. And so for us, we are trying to get prepared as best we can for this unknown, right? To Charles's point, we're just not sure what the database or what that instrument's going to look like for input. But we are trying to get prepared for that so that we can support the regulation. I mean, it's a regulation, we're going to be there. So that's part of it, right? So as relates to the other two sort of regulations you talked about, we were already reporting scope 1 and scope 2. We're working on scope 3. So that for us is not really a problem globally. And then as it relates to EPR, there's multiple states in the United States that have adopted this approach that Canada has been doing for years.
Mm-hmm.
They're all in different sort of places on the journey. And Sappi, is in conversation with sort of, let's call it the paper industry's governing body, the American Forest Products Association, AF&PA, to really have a seat at that table and work and collaborate with the organizations that are going to be supporting and extending EPR, because it is coming. And so we're all going to have to work on getting comfortable with that and figure out what our roles are and our accountabilities. So we feel like we're in a pretty good spot, but to Charles's point, there are some unknowns, and we're going to have to be nimble I think that's probably the best word, is we're just going to have to be nimble.
You know, and Lakeside Book falls into that same category as Catherine was just talking about. We've got businesses in Canada, we've got businesses in the United States, so we're going to have to be prepared as they move forward and these regulations start to take hold. At this point, they're a little, it's gray, as Charles was talking about. There's a lot of unknowns with it as they're working through it. But as they're coming down the pike, I think in the long run, it will make it somewhat easier because you'll know exactly what to do, when to do, and how to do it. We're going to have to be creative in some of our processes and whatnot to make sure that we can maintain it. But again, you know, much as I don't like regulations, I think in this case, it's not necessarily going to be a bad thing.
Agreed. Well, thank you, Susan, and thank you all for the thoughtful conversation. I know I've definitely gained a lot of insight during our short time together, and I look forward to having more conversations like this as we continue to raise awareness of this topic. So at this time, I'd like to pass it back to Irene to begin the Q&A.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Kathy, Susan, Charles, and Claudia for this terrific, informative panel. We didn't get any questions in the Q&A. We do have one in the chat. If you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. I also have a couple questions that let me ask the one in the chat. So Mark has asked, regarding the issue of the reporting being too onerous, have any of the panelists heard of any publishers, particularly non-European, that have discussed discontinuing selling some of their products, perhaps backlist, due to the cost benefit of complying?
Not that I'm aware of, but I'm in touch with the sales team, but I am unaware of anything at this point. Certainly it's a possibility.
Yeah, I've not heard anything to that extent either.
No.
I have a couple questions. If you have questions, feel free to raise your hand and I'll call on you. One of my questions is actually, so Charles, you had mentioned that HarperCollins UK measures a baseline and that, you report on it every year. And I'm curious, how long did it take to establish that baseline, and how does Harper UK decide what metrics to use?
So our baselines through the Science-Based Targets initiative, we baselined our scopes 1 and 2 in 2016 and our scope 3 in 2021. It took, I think, about 3 years to actually do that, believe it or not. So you kind of to establish all the kind of the key points in your supply chain is quite a job. You need to do it accurately is quite an effort, and that was done, thankfully, not by me. That was done by our owners. But it's quite a job. It's 7 pillars: transport, end of life. I'm just trying to think. Paper, commuting to work. There's everything. Yeah, even down to people commuting to work. Yeah, that's part of scope 3. But the large part of ours is our product that we sell effectively, which makes up about 75%, and a large proportion of that is paper. About 50% of that is actually paper. So, and establishing what paper you're using in all your books that you produce, how much paper, how much energy you're using with all. It's a big job. But once you've done it, and once you've created that framework, it's just going back and reporting every year. So you go back to your suppliers and you work out how much paper you use. So it's not too bad once you've done it, and you do it through CDP, which is Carbon Disclosure Project, I think.
Yep.
Oh, fantastic.
Yep.
Even at midnight. Yeah, and you do that every year. And then you can see your progress, and you put little plans in place, and you go, okay, how can we cut this by 2%? But effectively, as well, you've got to keep up with science-based targets. You've got to reduce your carbon emissions by about 5% per year. Okay. To put things into perspective.
I have one other question. And I think that's the last question. Unless someone else has one, feel free to raise your hand. So my last question is, how long has each of you had sustainability positions in your C-level suites at your respective organizations? And if that was a change that you were able to bear a witness to, what changes did you notice when it happened?
I can tell you in my role, it was literally when I was hired. I've been with the company since August of 2021. Has it changed significantly? It's a brand new role, so yes, it has. And I think there was some conversation about it. I mean, they actually started the process of collecting the data earlier than when I was hired, but we hired a third-party consultant to do our original baseline study. And now this year we're doing it in-house, and we'll have our first sustainability report out by the end of May of this year.
Thank you, Susan.
Mm-hmm. So at Sappi, we had in North America, oh man, you're going to make me do math here. Our director of sustainability position, I think, was created in 2008. It's going to be roughly that timeline. And that individual still does report it up to a C-suite position. At that time, it was sort of embedded in the marketing role, but we moved it to the R&D innovation and sustainability role. So now we actually have that embedded in the title of our vice president of R&D innovation and sustainability. That's the ownership there. And we have a director of sustainability that reports up into him. And our director of sustainability role has evolved over time as it's become more complicated. So we've actually taken certification sort of out of that. And we have a manager for certified fiber. So we have a manager of certification, which lives over here, and director of sustainability. They collaborate, but our director of sustainability's role is much broader and has allowed us to, again, I talked earlier about moving beyond the concept of certification when it comes to paper, because paper is a lot more than whether it's made of certified fiber, and really expanded our horizons in terms of being able to respond to customers like HarperCollins on giving them a product that they can feel good about using.
Yeah. And in HarperCollins, I mean, our journey started I would say in 2012 with the FSC global rollout, but there was no one taking ownership within the business. So I think the paper manager and the paper team were looking after the kind of FSC area, and there was auditing done of our suppliers, our main suppliers, to make sure the health and safety was there, which we kind of talked about, and the social compliance, but it didn't really kind of come together until about 5 years ago, when it was more the questions we were being asked by retailers, and because different people were answering different questions who weren't, I wouldn't say I'm an expert by any means, so, but it's very kind of you to say so. But there were people that really didn't know the answer, so there was emails flying about saying, can you answer this? Oh, no, not really, and passing it on to someone else, kind of thing within the business. And I've always been interested in sustainability, and I kind of put my hand up and said, look, I'd like to take the lead on this, and it grew from there. And then we put the teams in place internally, and it's gone from FSC paper to what Katherine's saying is to try and work out the kind of water usage per ton on certain papers, the carbon emissions per ton on certain papers. So we're working with the most kind of ethical paper groups now globally, rather than the FSC paper we could find, or which was kind of convenient and things like that. We want to work with ethical companies, and so it's evolved, I think, even in the last 5 years. And I personally have learned so much, and continue to learn so much by collaborating with colleagues and people in the industry.
Thank you. Thank you, Charles. I think that's all the time we have for questions. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Let's give a round of applause. You can use your emoji icon or silently on screen for our panelists and our moderator. This was a really great panel. And we really appreciate all of you joining us today. We appreciate all our panelists. Charles is here and it's midnight where he is. He's tired. So thank you everyone for joining us on this virtual event. For a list of upcoming events and past events, visit our website, which I'll drop in the chat, and it's newyorkbookforum.org. Next event is May 15th, and I'm really glad to see everyone virtually today. I hope I see everyone at the next one. Thank you again to our panelists. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for enlightening us and teaching us. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Night.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
night.
Bye-bye.